Hello and welcome. My name is James. This week's episode comes from the passage in the Our Daily Bread devotional for April the 1st, which is Hebrews 10:19 to 25. This passage sums up much of what comes before it in the book of Hebrews. It describes how God has opened up a new way for us to come before Him and enter into the most holy place, His very presence. This new way that we can come to Him is through what Jesus did for us on the cross. His sacrifice in our place grants us the privilege to enter. Now, the most holy place is a concept that's a bit hard for us to wrap our heads around in our current times. The best way to think of it is God's throne room, the place where He dwells and where He rules from. But for the original recipients of this letter to the Hebrews back in the first century, it brought to mind a very real, physical location. It was the innermost part of the temple, cordoned off by curtains, where the presence of God would appear on earth. It was so special and so sacred that only the high priest was able to enter on one day of each year to offer sacrifices to God. To the Jews, this was the meeting place of heaven and earth. So all of that is to set the scene of what we're going to read in this passage. So keep in your mind as we do how sacred that space is, and let's read the passage. Hebrews chapter 10, verses 19 to 25. Therefore, brothers and sisters, since we have confidence to enter the most holy place by the blood of Jesus, by a new and living way opened for us through the curtain, that is, His body, and since we have a great priest over the house of God, let us draw near to God with a sincere heart and with the full assurance that faith brings, having our hearts sprinkled to cleanse us from a guilty conscience and having our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for He who promised is faithful. And let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. What the writer of Hebrews is saying is pretty world-changing. It's not just the high priest, one person who's allowed to enter into God's presence on special occasions. Now anyone can enter in and stand in God's presence. We now have direct access to God. And the passage tells us that we have confidence in our ability to do so. Because it's not because of anything that we've done, but because it's been achieved by Christ Himself. So there's no maybe, no uncertainty. Instead, we can have full assurance and full confidence. Think of a small child who's meeting someone for the first time. In fact, my youngest was like this. She would be incredibly shy meeting someone new. Wouldn't say hi, wouldn't interact or talk or engage with them. But if she spotted me coming to her across a crowded room, she'd run straight for me, cling on to me, and talk away almost non-stop, telling me all the things that she'd been doing. This is the kind of confidence that we can have in approaching God. This truth is a great privilege. We can now be with God, but it's also actually an incredible invitation. We're invited to draw near to God through this new way He's made open for us. So like Stephen did last episode, let's use our imaginations for a bit and sit with this. What do you think it means to enter into the most holy place? What might that look like? So let's take a calming breath, close our eyes, and if you can, let loose your imagination. Bring into your mind the image of a dark, tall chamber. There are large, heavy, incredibly thick curtains in front of you, covering the doorway to where God's presence is. But where these curtains have always been closed before, imagine them being parted, being opened. And now imagine the hands of Jesus, His hands still showing the scars from the cross, beckoning you in, inviting you to enter. See Christ standing there expectantly. He knew you were going to come, and He's asking you to come forward. Remember the words we've just read together, that we can have confidence to enter into this holy place because of what Jesus has done, because of what those scars on His hands represent. And as He beckons you in, take Him up on His offer. Accept the invitation, step through the parted curtain, and enter into that most holy place that is God's presence. And when you're there, sit with him. Sit with God like Mary sat at Jesus' feet. Listen to him, perhaps bringing to mind a psalm or another Bible verse, and listen to him. Talk with him. Share your concerns. Now, it may seem a little strange to have painted this picture of the most holy place and now us coming in and sitting down to talk with God. It doesn't really feel like somewhere we belong. But that's what this passage tells us. We can enter God's presence anytime. This passage goes on to encourage us to come with a sincere heart and later to continue to meet with other believers as we meet with God. But remember that anytime you draw near to God, we can draw near to him with the assurance, that full and total confidence that a child has running up to their parent. So this week, as you're spending time with God, maybe try using this imagination prompt again. See yourself entering into God's presence, sitting with him and listening to him. And let that continue to reinforce and strengthen the hope we profess. For he who promised is faithful. To read or listen to this episode, see the links in the description, and we'll see you next week.